We're just waiting for that live to come in. Okay, and we are live. Hello, everybody out there in YW land. I'm Kim, the CEO at YW Northeastern New York, where every day we work to eliminate racism, empower women, and promote peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all. We are so happy to have you with us today as we continue our Making Herstory live conversation with some amazing women in our community who have made and continue to make history with us each and every day. Women's History Month is a celebration of women's contributions to history, culture, and society, and has been observed annually since 1987 in the month of March in the United States. Today, I have Carmel Patrick and Doreen Scarchilli de Toro with me, both city council members in Schenectady, in addition to being fabulous women in so many other aspects. And today we're going to find out what those aspects are. So welcome, folks. Welcome, Carmel and Doreen. I'm so happy to have the dynamic duo right here with me on our Making Herstory live stream. So who are you? What do you do? And why do you do it? Who wants to go first? This is going to be a first for me doing kind of double duty. So Doreen, you want to tell us who you are and what you do and why you do what you do here in our lovely community?
I absolutely do, Kim. Thank you so much. So, yes, the dynamic duo, I like that. So Carmel and I are out now getting petitions signed, and we'll be out campaigning together to seek another term on the city council. So, but my main job every day, besides being a mother and a grandmother, is I own a funeral home here in the city of Schenectady. And what I do every day is work with the unimaginable pain of so many. And I'm honored to be entrusted with their most precious loved ones. I just recently saw a quote this morning on a funeral I was on, and it said, "A funeral is more than a single day in a lifetime. It's a lifetime in a single day." And boy, did that bring me right to what I do. I mean, sometimes I tell folks it's like planning a wedding or a reception or a celebration, and you have a certain amount of time to do it in. And so I'm honored to be able to help everyone who come and trusts us with their loved one. Grief is like a tsunami. It's up and it's down, and there's emotions all over the place, and there's just waves of sadness and anger and happiness and memories. And so the most important thing I think I do is listen. I just sit there. Okay. And it's a time where people need to talk, and people need to remember, and people need to express their emotions. So that's one of my biggest qualities is listening.
Okay.
And that's kind of what I do every day. In addition,
and then how did you get engaged with the city council, Doreen?
So for the Schenectady City Council, in high school, or I've always been a woman of service. I don't care where I was, whether
I love that, woman of service. I'm going to write some stuff down too, because I just think all these great things that people are saying. So go ahead. Yes. Always been a woman of service.
Yes, and I seldom, talk on myself, but always since a very young age. My mom taught us to go out into the community and to serve. We were delivering Thanksgiving baskets, meals, caring for our sick relatives. In school, I was, on the student senate and class officer, and just always looking out for those who needed a little bit more attention than all of us, because we all need looking out for. Let's face it. So anyway, I've always been a woman of service. So I get into being a mom, and of course serve the community and my girls' community in so many different areas. Again, just being out there. And then, the girls are grown, and what do I do? And my mom actually ran for mayor of Waterford when she was in her 60s. So, Italian immigrant woman, came here at 8 years old. So I said, you know what? I wonder, let me get involved with the city a little bit more. Of course, I run a few things downtown here, but I love the city. It's a vibrant community, and all I want to do is help, and that's my job. So I mentioned something to one of my daughters, Raffaella, who was a good friend of Mr. Palomini's, and he kind of hooked me up. Okay. And that was that.
You were off and running to the races.
Here I am.
That's amazing. Okay, so let's talk about Carmel. Carmel Patrick, who are you? What do you do? And why do you do what you do here in our wonderful community?
Well, first, I just want to say, so I met Doreen during the process. I didn't know Doreen, even though I feel Doreen knows everyone in town, I'm telling you. But I met her during the process of her campaign. And I have to say, in getting to know her, and now I feel like we're like sister friends, but in getting to know Doreen over the last couple of years, you couldn't pick a more perfect woman to be doing what she does, because she's just so kind and so giving. And so the idea of her being the person that people entrust when they're in such pain makes perfect sense to me. I mean, she's just an amazing woman. So
Thank you, Carmel.
and like Doreen, I mean, absolutely, since I was a young person and certainly growing up in my family, service was all around me. Every single person in my family, my father, my mother, my siblings, in some way volunteered. And back then, a lot of it was focused around our church community, right? I mean, I went to Catholic school at the school that in the parish that our church, and our church was, you know, my parents were probably baptized in that church and married. I mean, it was just the focal point. And so everyone was doing something. And my mother certainly inspired that in me. And the same as Doreen. I mean, I was thinking about this the other day. I'm getting ready to go to my 46th high school reunion this weekend. And, you know, I was thinking about that because, you know, I chaired the homecoming committee and I chaired the prom committee and I was a cheerleader and I was the yearbook editor. And I think about how that today is sort of similar to what I do. It ended up being, you know, kind of my career was in higher education and then in nonprofit management. I was a fundraiser for, you know, I was working for over 40 years in those fields. And much of what I did and do today still dates back to some of the things that I learned as a young person. But so I'm on the city council. I'm running for re-election for the second term on the city council. I think it's really important to be involved in that way. I think that I still bring value to the table, and there's a lot more that I want to do. But I really get joy from my volunteer work. And, you know, actually, you know, whether it was the YW or many other opportunities. I mean, I'm still on the board of the library, and that is a passion for me. Always since I was a little girl, libraries have had a big part in my life.
I see all the books behind you.
Well, yeah, you know, I ended up marrying a writer, so it all kind of flowed together. But really, I have to say that, you know, the work that I do in the community is really the joy. It just brings me joy. So I'm thrilled that probably about just about a year ago, I stopped working in nonprofit. I focus on city council. I focus on all my volunteer work. I don't know how I worked full time because I'm out and running every single day and night.
So it's like you are so many things and at so many things.
I guess that's, you know, that's what I do.
All right, so I'm going to dive right into some of these questions since we're talking about making history, herstory, as we like to call it here at the YW. And I'm going to start with question 11. I'm really going to throw you a wrench here. If you could speak with any woman or femme presenting person in history, who would it be, and what kinds of questions or insights would you be talking about and asking? Who do you want to sit down on a park bench with and have a conversation with? Doreen.
So, being Women's History Month, I try to read every night, Google someone
who's a great idea.
Well, famous in history. Last night I was on some Muslim women and Asian women, Black women, Italian women, just trying to get a different perspective, because we all know with history, the victor wrote history. So I want to know exactly what's going on. But then also, along with the people and the women that I've read about and inspired to, is I always Google a victim every night. And we can never forget the victim. And what makes that history is how far things haven't come as far as the victim. And the victim's name isn't always there, but I'll pick a different city and Google some domestic violence or some child abuse, women suffering. But who's always there is the abuser. So I struggle with this, to pray for the abuser. But I pray for the victim, that they can see their way through and at some point give forgiveness, which brings me to whom I would love to sit down with. And we're
Is
going to go right to that Mother Teresa woman, because
oh, okay.
I don't think, and there's so many. I can't.
Oh yeah.
Right? You can't pick.
Sure.
I'd like to be as strong as I do kind of think I am as strong as Rosa Parks, because I can stand up and give my opinion and say, no, I'm not leaving. I'm mad as hell. I'm going to stand right here. I'm going to sit right here. But Mother Teresa puts into me a true passion of forgiveness and humility and reaching out to everyone, no matter who you were. So what questions would I ask her? I guess I would ask her, and I probably know the answer, although I don't know the answer, is, how did you become who you are? And I know through the grace of God that she became who she is. And I would never compare myself to her, but I'd like to emulate Mother Teresa all the time by leading by example and trying to set an example and being positive all the time and helping everyone that I come across. I don't care who they are. Driving down the street with a snowplow on the front of my truck, helping somebody, push a little snow to the side.
Sure.
And again, it's not something that I, that I like to put out there. It's just something that I have here.
Yeah,
So
sure.
Mother Teresa is
That's who you would choose. Wonderful. That's a great person to sit on a park bench with, and
right.
And those things about humility and forgiveness and emulating and leading by examples definitely resonate with both of you, that I see in the work that you do every day in our community. So now I'm going to segue to Carmel, and let's see who her person is. Let's see who she chose.
Well, it was difficult, as Doreen said, to think about one, but honestly, all my life, I've been just hugely a fan of Eleanor Roosevelt. And I know that almost sounds trite, right? Like, how many women are probably going to pick Eleanor Roosevelt? But when I started thinking about the questions that I would ask her, what I think about Eleanor Roosevelt is she was just such a remarkably courageous woman, because in her time of her life and in her class background, right? I mean, she really broke through a lot of barriers by being the person that she was, in terms of fighting for human rights and in terms of being a partner to the President of the United States in a really meaningful way. And she also had to overcome a lot. I mean, she had to overcome bullying. She had to overcome her, be really the support for her husband, who had to hide a debilitating illness. She hid her sexual orientation, and she fought for human rights all over the globe. And there were a lot of people, a lot of men, who did not want her to have that kind of front and center stage. So that would be, I'd want to talk to her about where she found within herself the courage to be able to be the spokeswoman and the fighter that she was, because it certainly wasn't the way that she was brought up.
Sure.
And so she had to really fight a lot of those things. And then I know this is also going to sound kind of silly, but I'm adding that, I spoke to my mom every day. And of course, I obviously was brought up by her in a very close fashion. But I guess I wish I still had the chance to talk to my mother, because certainly for advice, mostly because then I would say, no, I'm not going to do that, because that's
have a cookie and cake for breakfast. Right in front of her.
Exactly. She was really up on current events, and she just stayed very well educated. She only had a high school education, and she was definitely, they were a very poor Italian immigrant family. But I'd love to talk with her about the stuff that's going on in our world today.
Sure.
Some more than I did. So that was the other person I just wanted to throw in there.
Great choices. I think they're amazing. It's amazing to hear both of you talk about your choices, and then to see both of you doing what you do really shows that you are leading by example, from also the example of others in history. So next question, I am skipping around. So let's talk about the feminist movement. Has the feminist movement succeeded? Why or why not? And throughout history, feminist movements have often focused on only the white women, cisgender women, and ignored or excluded women or presenting folks of color, trans, queer voices. How can we be sure to center all women in the feminist discourse moving forward? Like, what does that look like? And so talk a little bit about your feelings if we've made any advances, and then how are we more inclusive as we move forward?
Sure.
Who wants to go? Doreen?
Okay.
Okay.
So just, I think I was a young girl and I saw Virginia Slims on the TV. Okay. And the women were in long dresses, and I'm thinking, wow, okay, and I don't condone smoking by any, but
Sure.
back in the early 60s. And I said something to my mother about, what's this kind of all about? I mean, women weren't allowed to smoke. So, growing up in a Catholic house, attending a Catholic elementary school, again, and like I said, history belongs to the victor. There weren't too many things about women out there to learn about. Of course, we didn't have the internet. We couldn't explore anything. We just had to understand what was in our textbooks, and that was that.
Mm-hmm.
And we got the right to vote. And, that was basically about it, just the good things. But we don't ever hear about the bad things that happened. And especially still today in countries where very bad things happen to women, and they don't have a choice in who they vote for. They don't have a choice in even what they have to eat or who they need to speak to. So I think we've come a long way. Is it over? Absolutely not. By no means. And as far as involving other women of gender and culture, I mean, I think we all need to be true to our culture. And when we put it out there, we need to really fight for every woman in every culture, in every place. And through education, I think that's very important. So I think there's a long way to go, especially with things that aren't within the normal realm of a white woman smoking a cigarette on TV. So we need to include everyone in what we do moving forward.
Great answer. Carmel, what are your thoughts on this question?
Well, I think there's several of these questions could be combined, actually. And so I'm going to try to be as succinct as possible. But in terms of whether the feminist movement has succeeded, we certainly have made advances. And maybe you'll go back to that question and we can talk about some of those ways in which we've succeeded. But let's face it, we don't even have an ERA passed in New York State. So next year, hopefully, all of us will have the opportunity to see if we want to pass the ERA. Now, come on. I mean, the Equal Rights Amendment, again, the difference here is adding sex, adding gender, adding, bias against people because of their sexual orientation. I mean, those are important things that I know it seems symbolic. It seems symbolic, but it needs to happen. So that's one way in which we haven't succeeded. I certainly think that over time, over history, a lot of women were left out of many of the women's rights movements based on their race, based on other aspects. And so I think we have to continue to be as inclusive as possible. I think that today's feminist movement is based on that. I think today's feminist movement is really trying to say we have to be inclusive of not just gender, but of sexual orientation, of race, of disability, of age. I mean, all of those things. Sure. So I think that still needs to come. How do we do that? I mean, I think we all have to make sure that we're out there being active, whether it's voting, whether it's volunteering, and I know this is important to me, I'm sure it's important to you too, what we do to encourage young women and girls to understand democracy, to understand our rights to vote, to understand how far we've come. All of that is just so important. I mean, there's organizations out there that work on trying to make sure that girls are involved and learn about how they can become involved in government or get elected or, all of those kinds of things. So I think that we need to continue to do that. And then I also, I think that having discussions like this, I mean, we have to continue to look at history because history teaches us if anything, history teaches us what we shouldn't do. Ignorance of history allows injustice to continue all over the world. And I think Doreen mentioned, I mean, it's not just about our country. We really have to, consider the fact that women's rights are affected in so many. I mean, we are just so blessed to live in the United States. We've got our issues. I'm not saying that we don't, but when you look at how women are abused or assaulted, the violence against women here and all over the world, I mean, these are things we need to pay attention to.
Sure. Thank you. And you did allude to another question that we have here is, what are some other important gains that you believe we've made throughout history as women or femme presenting folks? What stands out to you, Doreen?
I being as sports minded as I am, I mean, it's just, I go through, like all of us, all women, we're very emotional. We wear our emotions, and that's okay to show our emotions. So there's, a few things that I take great pleasure in, and one of them are sports. So to put the Williams sisters out there, and to put Michelle Wie out there, and to put Billie Jean King out there, those are all women who struggled to get where they are in a society where their sports weren't women dominated. So to me, that's very important that I have these, and all women do, and especially younger women have these icons to look up to. So for me, it's very important to see them out there in sports. I mean, I can't even get into the music industry because it's just fantastic. To watch a little something on Dolly Parton last night, the struggles that she endured, but yet she's out there with her music and writing songs. So there's art, there's history, art history, there's music, there's sports, there's so many things that I look up to women that participate.
Well, we've seen so many advances in those areas where that allow women to express themselves in a way they see fit. And it doesn't always have to be soft and gentle. It can be hardcore. It can be in your face. It can be deliberate. And we want women to feel as if they don't have to fit into a certain framework. And so I think in those areas, sports, art, and music, that it allows the expression piece to come out, that you can be who you truly feel you are.
Yeah.
Is that so? Okay. So Carmel, what are your thoughts here about?
I mean, obviously the right to vote in our country, I mean, obviously was huge, and was that battle. I mean, if you read through the history of the suffragist movement, I mean, it was not easy. And it was violent, and women were abused in their fight against the power that, again, white men held over them. So definitely number one, the right to vote, but also the right to be able to be educated. Hello, we had to earn the right to be able to go to school in the same way that boys and men did. And even still to this day, when we think about access to feminine hygiene products and how the lack of access to those feminine hygiene products prevent girls in other countries from being able to go to school. Come on. So the right to an education, the right to be able to work. And I mean to work and keep and earn your own money and not have to give it over to your husband if you're married, right? I mean, let's face it. Doreen and I are the same age. I have friends of mine who are 5 to 8 years older than me. Okay. I'm not going to out anybody about their I know there's people watching that probably want to do that. But what I'm going to say is I've talked to women who were divorced, right? And they couldn't get a credit card. They couldn't own property. I'm talking in our lifetime, right? I think these are the kinds of things that we have to keep impressing on people. And it's another reason why we have to read history and understand history, because these things are easily lost. Okay. When you look at the state of our Supreme Court right now, we can see that things can get lost. So again, that right to vote, to this day, we have to get out there and make sure that people are voting. Well, everybody, not just women.
Absolutely, everybody.
But
Yeah.
I think that's important. And then certainly we've broken down glass ceilings in many, many areas, but there's still there's still a lot of work that has to be
Right.
done in that arena as well. The only other thing I'm going to say is God bless Margaret Sanger and the other people that worked with Margaret Sanger, because if we didn't have access to birth control, the way that women did, again, before my time, but you know, I mean, that allowed women to be out of the house and be able to go to work, right? In a lot of ways. So I'm gonna throw that in to my list as well.
Sure, the lists are great. I mean, these are all fabulous points. I think about the YW here, and most of the women who lived here in the 40s and 50s came here because they were working at GE or Alco in secretarial services, but they could not get their own apartment. So they came here because they could sign a lease with the YW. Otherwise, if they were living out in the community at that time, they needed a man to sign the lease for them.
Right.
So just another, you know, the right to have your own living area is really another gain that we've made. That's very important.
Yeah.
And so great. So let's move on here. And I know we're at 26 minutes, but we're having such a great time. I'm going to ask another question.
Okay.
So what makes you both, each of you, a good leader? Like, and why do we need more women in leadership roles in our community? I know these seem like silly questions, but I want to hear your perspective on that.
I don't think that it's silly at all. Again, Carmel alluded to the fact that, you know, we need to show our younger generation of women how to lead. And a lot of times, even though we've made great strides, it's just easier to hop on the bandwagon and get behind someone. And so we have to show them how strong and independent we are. And I've taught my girls that, and I'm very proud of them. My mom came here as an 8-year-old from Italy with a 12-year-old sister on a boat from Italy to live in Schenectady with people they've never met in their entire life.
Wow.
Okay. So the strength and the independence and things that I learned from my mom, but yet keeping my culture and my heritage alive to my girls is very important. So we just need to educate. We need to educate young girls, and Carmel and I and anyone else in the city or the state, the country, wherever, who is in a leadership role. We just need to always stay positive and show people how to act, how to respect, and I think move forward from there. I think it's very important.
Thanks, Doreen. How about you, Carmel? What are your thoughts there?
Well, in terms of myself as a leader, I think that I'm smart. I think that I'm ethical. I work hard. I try to be very resilient. That one's tough for me. Doreen knows that. I mean, I have to have a tough skin, and I have to have a tougher skin than I do. But I'm very dedicated and loyal. So those are things that I think. But I also feel like if you talk to people that ever worked with me, I'm a really strong collaborator. And I think in all of my workplaces, it was really important to me to focus on other people's leadership skills and help them foster those leadership skills. And again, that aspect of mentoring. I think for me, that probably is why I'm a good leader, is that I try to encourage that leadership in other people. I think in terms of more women leaders, it's not the 1950s anymore. I mean, let's face it. And women have proven for decades that we can excel as leaders, right? But all we also have to do is look at people like Marjorie Taylor Greene or Lauren Boebert to know that women make mistakes too. So I think it's really important that we continue to focus not just on, we have to focus also on competency. We have to focus on intelligence. We have to make sure that the people that we are putting into leadership positions, whether it's in government, whether it's in business, we have to be looking for people that are ethical. We have to look for people that are smart. We have to look for people that are compassionate, because there are some folks out there, and I'm sorry, I know I spoke specifically about a couple of women leaders here in our country, but come on, women can make mistakes too. So we have to be sure that those people that we are electing, those people that we're hiring, know how to lead. So it goes back to what we teach our young people.
Right. Absolutely. Great opinions and thought processes here. So last, what I want to talk about is, and Doreen, you alluded a little bit to it. What traits do the women in your family share? You talked a little bit about that your mom came here at the age of 8 with a 12-year-old sister. So talk a little bit about those traits in your family that led you to become who you are today, and why that's important in all families to look back to those folks in our lives that have really had an impact on us.
Yeah, I think, in my family, my mother was definitely had, I don't know really what I developed from my dad, but my mom had such strong traits
Okay.
as far as her personality. She was well read. She worked for the division of the budget in the library. She read an article every day. She passed the articles on to us. My sister, in fact, all of us four children, she passed all her traits on to us as far as being strong and independent, hardworking, responsible. Um, those were some things that she always taught us. And I'm proud of my siblings and myself. Um, and again, uh, it was all, I think, due to little 8-year-old Italian girl
Yeah.
who came here with struggles beyond belief.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and she always forgave,
Okay.
but she always let us know what happened. And sometimes my brother would say, I can't believe she still talked to so and so after what they did to her as a young girl. There was always a forgiveness in her.
Wow.
And forgiveness, and I guess not dwelling on negativity, which is
Okay.
something I love, because there might be a bandwagon behind me, but as far as I'm concerned, none of it happened. Who cares? Move on. Let's go.
Okay.
Um, and
I love it.
I try to always show that to my girls.
Every
And
day is a new day.
every day's a new day, for goodness sakes. And
So wonderful. I
we're
love the
blessed to
perspective.
have it. Yep.
Yep. And right, we're blessed to have a new day. And
Yep.
you would know better than anybody else in the funeral business that every day is a new day, and what a blessing that is. So thank you for that answer. Carmel, how about you? Talk a little bit about your answer.
Well, I've had incredibly strong women in my family, the same as Doreen in terms of that immigrant background. Although my mom was born here, my Aunt Rose, who was my godmother, came over as a 3-year-old with her parents. And my mom, I'll tell you, my mom did end her life in a nursing home. And the day that she died, the receptionist at the desk, I was walking through the lobby at one point, and the receptionist looked at me. She said, "Your mom was fierce." And she meant in a very positive way. She said she wouldn't let anything bad happen to anybody, all the old people. My mother took care of all the old people on her floor. And my sister talked about that fierceness when she gave the eulogy at my mother's way. What did that do? She was very strongly opinionated. She was stubborn, but she was also just an incredible giver. She would give the shirt off her back. I mean, if you said, "Geez, Louise, I love that shirt," she literally would be like, "You know what? I'm going to go change my shirt. I want you to have this shirt." She literally would give you the shirt off of her back. The one thing that we always joke about is my mother was all about family. Like that's what she would say. She'd meet the two of you tomorrow, and without knowing you, she'd say, "Tell me about your family. Like, who are your brothers and sisters? I hope you get along with them, because that's the most important thing in the world is family." So, and then she, like I said, she had a high school education, but I'm telling you, we had books in the hallways of our house. Every single room of our house had books. Every night, my mother was reading newspapers, reading magazines, reading books. She took me to the library when I was 4 years old to get my library card. So that was really important to her. My Auntie Rose, my godmother, lived down the street, and I loved being at her house. She was an amazing cook, but she also was one of the kindest, big-hearted, loving women. And I'm talking she had 6 kids. The other thing I want to say, my grandmother, Carmela, and my Aunt Rose worked. They worked in factories. Okay. They raised all these kids. They did not have the modern appliances, right? Or whatever that we have.
There was no here's a Chromebook, go play in your corner. It was
no, and they had to do the work. It wasn't like they had, life partners that would necessarily do the laundry or do the ironing. I mean, they were doing it all.
Wow.
So I think, and then I want to just say my sister, Geraldine, is my big sister. She's 10 years older than me. She was a teacher in her career. She's so smart. She's so up, keeps herself so up on current events. And the same thing, that giving, that, always giving, always. And then, we also all became worrywarts. I think that's the Italian part of us. But, we just are, no, Doreen,
Not
say
me.
I'm like Miss Warrior, as everybody that knows me. So I don't know. I mean, I guess I inherited all that. The one thing that they all taught me across the board was that a woman could be whoever she wanted to be.
Yeah.
You work hard. You don't just sit back and watch other people do things. If you care about something, if you want to change something, you roll up your sleeves, you get out there, you do it. And I would have to say that the women in my family, that's where I got that.
Well, we are here today, women elevating history throughout history, happening right now. I want to thank Carmel and Doreen for being here with us. You've been amazing. What a share. That was, I felt it. I hope everybody out there that we talked to felt it. I'm going to use some summarized words here. Service was all around me. You were a cheerleader. My service in the community brings me joy. Looking at different perspectives, never forgetting the victim or the survivor, and how far things haven't come, that we have a lot of work to do, but that you both seem to be so embedded in being women of service, but that we look out for each other, and that we all have to find our sister friends. And so that we always can be giving and positive and emulate and lead by example. So I want to thank you and say that we appreciate you both for being part of making Herstory live streaming event during the month of March. You both truly made history, or Herstory in so many ways, and are making history. And I want to thank everybody out there in YW land for spending some time with us today. Next week, join me again on Wednesday, 3/22, when I have an in-depth conversation with Mary Liz from the Underground Railroad Museum in Albany, for making history 2023. Thank you, Carmel and Doreen. Have a wonderful day.
And
thanks for inviting us.
You're
Kim,
welcome.
thank you. And I just want to say thank you for who you are, what you do, and being a leader.
It's been
And
a
I thank
pleasure.
you. And I thank
Yes,
you.
absolutely. Thanks for everything the YW does.
You are both most welcome.